Story. The Environmental Protection Agency, the EPA, is under fire right now by a group of bipartisan senators who are taking the agency to task for releasing personal information about 80,000 farmers and ranchers, information like names and addresses and phone numbers. Now, the EPA admits it released this data in response to a Freedom of Information request from certain environmental groups. Those groups apparently wanted to know more information about farmers to take a closer look at water pollution. Now, since it happened, the EPA admitted it was wrong, but the plan to prevent it from happening again is unclear, and that's what the senators want to know more about. Joining us now is South Dakota Senator John Thune. He's chairman of the Senate Republican Conference and has been asking the EPA for answers since April. So, Senator Thune, in April, we didn't have the IRS story about a government agency that was looking at a specific group. And that's the big question here. Based on what you know, do you think this was a mistake, an honest mistake made by an agency, a mistake that they admit, or do you think that there's something more malicious going on?
Well, the way I look at this, Jenna, and really, you didn't have the IRS when we initially got this information. This was back in April. We got a tip that there were 80,000 farm and ranch families who had had confidential information released to these left-wing environmental groups by the EPA. But what it appears is that the EPA is trying to help these left-wing groups, help their friends attack, in this case, their enemies, which are hardworking farm and ranch families. And the information that they put out there was at the request. It was a FOIA request, but they put out more personal information, and they've admitted now that they did. The problem is the information's already out there. They asked these organizations to give it back, but by then the damage is already done.
Well,
but it's a pattern. It is a pattern, and it creates, I think, a serious credibility gap for this administration when they release this kind of information, to these left-wing environmental groups.
So let's talk about the real-life effect of this information being out. As the South Dakota senator, you have hundreds of farmers and ranchers who had their information released. What have you heard from them? Have they had, strangers showing up at their property? Have they been harassed in any way? What's the real-life effect of this information being released?
Well, they're extremely disturbed about it because these organizations like Earth Justice and National Resource Defense Council are constantly attacking ranching and farming and agricultural operations in places like South Dakota. And so the fact that they would know names, addresses, phone numbers, geographic coordinates, personal information, confidential information on these farm and ranch families is extremely troublesome to these farmers and ranchers who are trying to go about their business and just make their living. And so it's something that we've heard a lot back from those in my state as well as from those in other states.
Do you have any evidence that this was a directive given somehow by anyone high up in the agency or even higher up in government to release this information, more information than really what was necessary or requested?
Well, we're trying to get an answer to that. I sent a letter. They have acknowledged that they did it and that it was wrong, but they haven't responded to the letter yet. So we don't know exactly where it came from. All we know is that this is a government agency, again, working, it seems to be hand in glove with these left-wing organizations, releasing confidential information that could be used to target hardworking farm and ranch families across this country. And it's again, typical, I think, based upon what we've seen with the IRS and the release of information, confidential information to ProPublica, which is a left-leaning organization. This is a pattern in this administration, and I think it creates this growing credibility gap with the American people.
So quickly here, the EPA actually gave us a statement. I'm just going to paraphrase it. They admit that they were wrong. They said that they asked for the information back. And apparently received it from these groups, but to your point, you say once it's out there, it's out there. How do you hold them accountable, Senator? What's the next step here in preventing this from happening again?
Well, I've not heard a response back to my letter, Jenna, but we've also followed up now a group of senators, as you mentioned earlier, with a series of questions. Why did they have to release the personal information? Did they consult with the Department of Agriculture, which would have seemed to make a lot of sense? If they've done a series of questions to try and get some oversight, some accountability, some transparency with regard to this, and so far we have not heard back. So we're still awaiting an answer from the EPA. Again, it's hard to know exactly what was behind this, who was behind this, but I think those are all things we need to find out.
We're going to take a closer look as well, Senator, and we look forward to having you back on it. FoxNews.com has been on this story since it first broke, and we look forward to, again, following it and looking for evidence of that pattern and what exactly is next. So we look forward to having you back. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Jenna.